trying to make an income.
Dr. Markowitz, we're ready whenever you'd like to proceed.
Let's go.
Okay. First order of business is approval of the minutes of the September 20th meeting.
Great, thank you.
The Coroga Lake BLS First Responder Unit requests approval of their application to use EPI and requires an approval from the REMAC to begin. Whatever the pleasure of the REMAC physicians is. Their paperwork is complete and signed by their medical director, Dr. Glenn.
Perfect. Sounds good.
You're getting just in time before the AHA takes it off of.
The Sharon Springs Rescue Squad provides medical director verification of their services provided. That's purely informational. It's a kind of a routine filing of this, but I like to let the REMAC know about it when we get one. And the Sydney Center provides medical director approval of glucometer training. That's Dr. Sosnow, and they have to apply directly to Wadsworth Labs for their CLIA waiver, but they just wanted us to know that they're going forward with it. Grand Gorge Rescue Squad is requesting a change of service level from critical care to paramedic. Their paperwork is in order. It is signed by their medical director, and they're just seeking the REMAC approval for that.
I think it's a good idea. Yes.
Okay.
Brand new.
Update on the status of AAREMS BLS FR agency recertifications. Mr. Farrell, sir.
Everybody is up to date. Aaron gets another gold star. Same thing with the recertification and inspection.
Ah, here. Update on the status of ALS agency controlled substances licensing, hospital pharmacy involvement, and current medication shortages. That would be open to discussion from around the room, I guess.
Jack, are we seeing anything for shortages?
Uh,
Trying to think of any.
Decatron, the proper dosages weren't available when I was down there yesterday.
Really?
They had 4 milligrams, but not 10s.
Oh, okay. No, we have it ourselves up in Speculative. We haven't seen anything. Haven't had any problems at all with getting what we needed. But haven't. See, we buy our Decadron from Emergency Medical Products with Dr. Glenn's okay. So we don't go through the hospital pharmacy for that. The only thing we go through our hospital pharmacy for is controlled subs.
So there was an email sent out to all the program agencies and REMACs about a week ago from Dan Clayton. There's been several shortages popping up, odd ones in the area.
Huh?
Benadryl, IV Benadryl, for some reason is the latest one. So the email was sent out. It's on the agenda for the January CMAC meeting to review the policy statement for the therapeutic substitutions. However, if there's a substitution that's not included on that list, even though there's an expiration date, it's still valid, that you guys want to invoke, have the REMAC chair send an email to me at the office, and we'll go through the proper channels to try to get it approved or a better recommendation made based on other practice. I don't know if you saw that email come through, Phil, from Dan?
I did, as a matter of fact, yes. Yes, I
So-
did. Yeah. I'll shoot that out to everybody.
Yeah, I don't know what it, yeah, I'll be waiting for it.
It was, Dan sent it out to it just didn't get disseminated, I guess, further. But anyway, basically, so it came up because of the Benadryl issue. Central New York is having a devil of a time getting Benadryl. So they're gonna look at, I can speak to that one because I spoke with Susie about it. They're probably gonna go back to doing the liquid Benadryl, which used to be in the formulary. Well, with liquid Benadryl, you don't have to keep water with the Benadryl. Or you can do PO and just remember you have to be sure that there's water. But, I mean, that's just one example of what's, so they're just writing it up, sending it to me. It's gonna, Andy Johnson, even though he's left the Bureau, is still gonna help with it. And we'll go through Don and just get an official approval so that it can be done on a temporary basis. So, because so many of the shortages seem to fall around controlled substances and ALS modalities anyway, I agreed to take on this project. I don't know what I was thinking, but.
What you were drinking.
Yeah.
Mary, right now, do we see any major problems with the controlled substance shortages?
They're cyclical. I mean,
Yeah.
but most of the controlled substance shortages are addressed on that chart for the approved formulary substitutions.
There's just seem,
Other stuff that isn't.
because they're cyclical, that they're based upon whatever company's manufacturing it, it all expires at the same time, and everybody carries it, and then when they have to restock.
It's not so much that, it's controlled substances, if you look at them, are relatively inexpensive drugs. So they only manufacture them when they're not making expensive stuff. I mean, it really comes down to dollars and cents for the pharmaceutical companies.
I sent that article a couple months ago to Phil and he sent it around that really explained why it happens.
Yeah, that was a good article, that was a very good article, yeah. Well, Mary, I'm sorry, I kind of missed, I was writing something. What are they saying is a decent substitute for the Benadryl?
Benadryl, they were gonna look at, and it hasn't come in yet in writing, going back to the PO, the liquid form of Benadryl.
Oh,
It's quick.
You can do liquid, or you can do regular PO tablets. They're cheap, they're readily available, but if you do the tablets, you have to remember you have to keep water on
yeah.
the ambulance. But the other thing is, and we discussed this, if you tell them they need to keep a case of water in their ambulance in some compartment, well, now you can push the firefighter rehab side of it too. I mean, you can do it a roundabout way. But that's just my outside the box thinking.
So I just checked with my quartermaster, Cardizem, Epi 1 to 1000, and Haldol seem to be what we can't get.
Yeah, we're dealing with the Benadryl, Zofran's back, we have that, Benadryl and Cardizem.
EMP was, Emergency Medical Products, was back ordered for the longest time on the Zofran tablets, the disintegrating tablets, and then they came through with a vengeance. They took care of it, and they've taken care of all their back orders now from EMP, so I don't know about the Benadryl, we haven't had occasion to order any from them, but,
I believe the Benadryl is system-wide because the Syracuse area hospitals can't even get it.
On the Nathan Latour thing, Dr. Fisher, we were at the Fulton County Advisory Board meeting the other night, and one of the things that I found to be strange is Johnstown Fire, which we approved to be an ALS agency, had a very difficult time working with Nathan Latour Pharmacy again. And apparently, they were told that they want to standardize things and have every agency do it the same way, and that the pharmacist can't get a hold of anybody from the agencies.
That's not true, they haven't even tried.
But in the same sentence, he also told Jim McCready that if it was up to him, he would not supply EMS, and that he is undoubtedly not EMS friendly.
This is exactly the problem that Spectrum Ambulance had last year with Nathan Latour Pharmacy. And what it took to resolve it in our case was a sit-down with the VP from the hospital and the chief pharmacist and his right-hand man, Mike Sturgis, and we all sat down and we talked, and the line that they gave, I'm sorry, I don't mean to denigrate it, but what they were saying was that they wanted uniform paperwork right across the board, and they were satisfied in our case that they had the uniform paperwork. So for what it's worth, that was our experience. But it took a VP of the hospital to sit down with the pharmacy folks and myself, and we had a very friendly discussion, a very,
We were several months with.
as the State Department says, a very frank and earnest discussion we had. And the end result was a very good one. They gave us the drugs we needed, and they signed off on the agreements and so forth. And I tried to point out to them that we've been having the same agreement signed off on by the hospital, in our case, and I think in most cases around the room here, for the past 19 years. So, without any difficulties at all, with no problems.
I was just shocked that he told Jim that if it was up to him, they would have nothing to do with EMS, and the only reason why he does it is because his boss makes him.
Oh, well, he never said that to me, but that was the implication right along, to be honest with you. Yeah.
That's,
He
correct me
made
if
that
I'm
very
wrong, isn't that
clear.
what he said?
That's what he said.
That's the implication, yeah.
Communicate with the boss, don't communicate with the pharmacist. Don't get the message. So just talk to the boss, don't talk to the pharmacist,
Yeah,
because she's reasonable.
yeah, that's what I had to do. But after several months, it worked out.
Yeah.
Haven't had any problems since then. We've restocked since then and with no problem at all. No problem at all, except that Mike Tracy, who's a member of our squad and a member of Fulton County Ambulance, went down to restock us not too long ago on morphine, and was told that since he was restocking for Fulton County, he couldn't also restock the speculator the same day. He had to do each agency on a separate occasion.
Yeah, not sure on that one either.
In fact, that's what happened. He had to go back the second day to do it just for us.
Actually, that one I can't argue with, because B&E made, Mohawk Ambulance has two companies, Mohawk and Schenectady. They have to have two clearly distinct safe setups and everything. That's a B&E regulation, you can't have them together. So that I can't fault them on.
Okay.
Yeah, but in this particular one, I think when he came down to do our narcotics, they were done, he did whatever, he drops off the paperwork, and he wanted to pick theirs up before he went north.
So it might have to do with the transporting it in the company vehicle?
It was in a
Nope,
company
had nothing,
vehicle.
No?
he was in a company vehicle, I had,
For a company
No, but it
vehicle?
might have been because he had both sets together, they didn't
no,
like
they
that.
weren't together. If you stop and you get one place and you finish doing what you're doing and you drop off your paperwork for your next order, you got nothing. He wanted to pick up their stuff and carry it back that day because that's where he was going, and they told him no.
I understand your point, Mary, and I think that's a valid point for what the plan says and what B&E says. I don't think this pharmacist knew it, I think you just want to give him a hard time.
Yeah,
So Mike had to come back down the next day to do what he wanted, you know,
Mm.
it just made no sense.
Yeah, when he came back the second day, everything was fine. There was no problem at all. But I couldn't quite wrap my head around why that happened.
He wasn't picking them up both at the same time to go in different direction. It was one and then go back and get that one and go north with it.
Could I ask the agencies that get the non-controlled stuff from National Drug Pharmacy, do you encounter any problems with the non-controlled substances like we've encountered with the controls?
Other than a shortage or something?
Yeah.
I don't think they do.
No, okay. Just curious.
No, we haven't had any problem with none.
Just curious.
I was able to get the Benadryl yesterday too.
You are. Yeah.
But we generally don't deal with this guy for,
No, that's true. You don't deal with him directly. He probably doesn't even know what's going on
no.
with the non-control. Yeah. So how does it stand with the Johnstown Fire Department? It's
They finally got it resolved.
not, do they?
I think they're all set.
Oh, good.
hey, Jim, hold on one sec.
Making the paperwork standardized, even say Mary's just
Oh,
did that
sure.
with us.
Yeah, oh, I did too, and early on, last year this was, early on in my discussions with the new pharmacist, I tried to point out to him that the paperwork actually was standardized right across the board, because we all use the same template for the operational plan, you know? And negotiations were needed, as it turned out. But I do recall when the chief pharmacist at the meeting I had with the VP and the others, when the chief pharmacist went to sign the controlled substance operation plan, the speculator, he looked up and he said, "Now this is the one you want me to sign, right?" He said to the VP. But she said, "Yes, that's the one." Okay. That was the only.
Just not a good guy.
You're quite right. Anyway.
Okay, thank you.
We have not received any correspondence that would necessitate an executive session, and so we just, I'll just ask on behalf of the REMAC physicians, is there any old or new business to be discussed? We've been discussing it, of course, the last several minutes, but anything else?
And now it's gonna go to Wisconsin.
Okay. All right. Anything else to be brought before the REMAC?
Blood transfusions.
Oh, yes.
Packed cells. Packed red blood cells. The ambulances can give if they have a present. That's not, that thing from the state. I don't know what the deal is with it, but.
We talked about it last month.
Right, that is not their understanding, that the ambulance is considered a separate facility, and that even if we bring a nurse, it cannot be in an.
I just spoke with Mike Daly at length about this, and in the Remo area, they're allowing it to happen, and it's how you interpret the law, I guess, of the things. There's 58.2.16 and 58.2.20.
But you looking at me for it now.
There you go.
I will say this, they wrote a letter to the Commissioner of Health, not Remo, but the state council.
Doctors, yeah.
Doctors wrote a letter to the Commissioner of Health asking that they not enforce the law on ambulance services to allow just that to happen. And the commissioner did not approve it, said absolutely not, he's not going to approve it, that they will work to change the law, but they're not going to suspend enforcement against ambulance services in hospitals. And that's right from the commissioner.
If you're looking for some really good physician input, I'd suggest reaching out to Deb Funk. I had a great conversation with her about this because she spent pretty much a decade of her life working on getting this passed. And she feels that there might be, I don't want to speak on her behalf, but she proposed a couple different ways that possibly hospitals that needed to move patients who would not live otherwise could still get around it here and there, but that legally, flat out, that the law says what it says, the commissioner turned it down, and that ambulance services cannot legally do this.
Without becoming an ambulance transfusion service.
What is even more puzzling to this is LifeNet is scrambling as of this point and sending contracts to all of the hospitals in which they serve because they can't take patients out of even St. Mary's Hospital with blood running without this agreement. And now they're scrambling to get basically every hospital in New York on board with them. It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
Without what agreement?
Ambulance
The ambulance transfusion
You have to
service
have
agreement.
memorandums of understanding and follow the hospital, every individual hospital's procedures and protocols. So for instance, we serve, Little Falls Hospital, St. Mary's Hospital, Naples Court. We have to have a contract with each of those hospitals, and we have to follow, if we take a patient out of St. Mary's, we have to follow their procedures. If we take a patient out of Naples Court, we have to follow their procedures. It's crazy. There's not a set way to do it. And without those agreements in place,
Is there a template out there to accomplish this?
there's
anyway?
forms, and there are templates out there, but here's a perfect example. The templates even that the state has, we're working with Ascension right now, who's whatever, 70-something hospitals, and they've had our They've had our agreement since April, and it has to go through their legal process, and I can guarantee at the end of the day, the document that we submitted is not even gonna be remotely close to the document we get back. Even though it's a
use the state
statewide
template.
template, we're using the state template, it will be changed, and it's crazy. They've had it since April. We've been trying to do this for, I submitted everything April 11th.
What year?
That's about it.
Fortunately, this year. But I can't get the contracts back.
You should say unfortunately, because if you just did it this year, you got 4 more years to go.
That's right.
So fortunately, like, the majority of our hospitals are Bassett. So Bassett, Mothership, Cooperstown is going to write this and then push it out to Tri-Town, Fox, all the other hospitals as a system-wide set of rules. So then we only have Margaretville and Delaware Valley and CMH being different, but the Bassett ones are gonna try to have the same rules, so you aren't having to learn one set of rules for each one of the Bassett hospitals.
Who's working on it?
Rebecca Fredericks, Transfusion Services Director or something like that.
Just seems like it's obviously set up the wrong way. You can't go by each different hospital's rules. You need to have rules of the agency that's doing the transport.
Yeah. So, and the other thing is that the forms we started with, they've told us that there will be new forms coming from Wadsworth's lab, but there's no new forms. Although Pat Delamater says she somehow gotten her hands on the new forms, so she's gonna bring me a copy today. So,
Who's in authority to change the way this is set up?
it took 7 years to get to this painful,
Yeah, Wadsworth.
more than 7 years.
Really who's driving the bus on this.
And the New York State Legislature.
Right.
But it's, they said the new process is easier and shorter. It's still very labor-intensive, time-intensive, and painful.
To be continued.
Well, it creates a huge problem. I mean, this is life and death, this is like serious. You get these little hospitals with no backup, and someone with an aneurysm that's bleeding, and they need blood and transport, and the ambulances are refusing to take the people because the state tells them they can't do it. So, you squeeze blood in and pray to God that they make it there. It's not.
So that was certainly, this was a humongous talk, and I think that I brought it up last month. I mean, the physicians on CMAC actually were, some of which, it got pretty belligerent with these two ladies from Wadsworth. It was like a bloodbath. So much so that the two ladies, when they came back, they started off their lecture the next day is that they will not basically be belittled like they were yesterday, in that these meetings were supposed to be professional, because it become unprofessional at one point, to say the least. It's just, they never even took into consideration areas in which BLS squads do transports or may have to do a transport out of the hospital. So even if you sent a nurse with a BLS squad, they couldn't do it. What's crazy is that patient is the hospital's until it reaches their destination. So,
So they were saying, and it's a 504 permit, it's a clinical permit, and they're saying it doesn't extend beyond the hospital property, or 540 or 504.
What's their reasoning? They gotta have a reason why they're doing this, right? Everybody's trying to do what they feel is the right thing. No one's intentionally trying to make things different.
for years and years and years, ambulances transported blood. We did it for as long as I can remember. And then all of a sudden, they said, nope, you're breaking the law. The only people, paramedics are not allowed to to transport blood products. And the law was a law, so that cut everybody off. And like Beth said, this was a 8-year process to get.
At least, Mark was involved with it from the beginning, and it was going on when I came back to the region in 2009. So I think it was about 2007 that they started working on this.
So they allowed paramedics to do it, but the ambulances had to apply to Wadsworth as a blood bank, in essence, in order to be allowed to carry it.
Is it a blood bank or
No,
a blood
Blood
transport?
transfusion, we're a
A
transfusion.
transfusion service, right?
But it's the same, almost the same processing that we have to go through. And it's just a difficult, it's not a difficult thing to fill out the application.
So if the REMAC here were to write a letter to someone, who would we write it to complain?
God.
I would have to go, I would say to the commissioner, to the commissioner of health. That's where the CMAC sent their letter.
I think it's reasonable, I mean, if they don't
If
hear.
you're a transfusion service or a transport transfusion agency, you don't carry your own blood, right?
No.
We wouldn't.
You'd always get the blood from the hospital?
Correct, and you have to use it.
So they also approved that you could transport medications that weren't in the formulary that could be given to you from the hospital to do a transport that way, right? There are a bunch of medicines that you can give on a transport?
For specialty care.
If you have a SET program,
Right. Medicines that aren't in the formulary that you wouldn't carry, that you would get from the
if
hospital.
you have an SET program, you train your providers, your medical director signs off on it,
Why didn't they just put the blood in there?
because it's a whole separate section of law that
Right,
has to do
it's
with
not a
bloods.
medication.
If anybody wants the ambulance transfusion services PowerPoint that was presented at the SEMSCO Systems Committee, get me your email, I have it, I can forward it to you.
Forward to
Okay,
Phil, he can.
Yeah, if you want to forward it to me, I can give it out to you.
okay.
Page 5 is the important page.
Has anyone seen the letter from Department of Health that actually came out on the 14th? Yesterday, that sent out. I was very shocked because it addressed actually a problem that we have in Amsterdam significantly, where we'll take a transport out of a hospital, and it probably only affects the people that do transports, and the hospital refuses to give a full report like they would expect from us on the patient, and they seal everything up in an envelope, and they tell you they can't tell you anything because of HIPAA regulations. So this happens frequently.
We've broken that barrier, because we've said it's continuation of care, and it's your patient, and if they don't get the right care on the way, because you failed to give us information, it's on you.
Right, I've stepped in and they get a copy of the patient's chart.
So we've asked for them, especially on our specialty care transports. We want the last 24-hour labs, you know, all that pertinent information for the last 24 hours. And sometimes it's not, about 50% of the time it's not an issue, 50% of the time it is. However, with that being said, I will forward to Phil and he can disseminate this. A letter came out from Department of Health from Ryan Greenberg and Ruth Leslie yesterday in regards to exactly this.
And it's very clear.
It went to the hospital CEOs addressing this particular issue. And that ambulance services absolutely 100% need this information, and it is not a violation of HIPAA.
And actually, it included even afterwards in follow-up.
Correct.
When they were able to do their QA, that.
And Albany Med is, and that's one thing that I can commend Albany Med for. When we take a patient to Albany Med, they have one person designated to doing follow-ups for EMS, especially for EMS charts. It's great because soon as they're a receiving facility, it gets flagged and it goes to Art, and he does the follow-up. He actually gives you the physician notes on the hospital follow-up page, and you can see exactly what happened to that patient when they were at the hospital. So that does help with QI, and that letter does address that the hospitals should be part of that QI process and giving follow-up.
Can you forward it to me, sir?
I will forward it to Phil, and he can forward it to everybody.
I'll send that to everyone.
Shit, guys, it came like yesterday, maybe last night, because I read it last night.
talking.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Be quiet.
I was kind of focusing on your screen there. Does anybody have anything else for the REMAC?
Sir.
Phil, or whomever, I was hoping, I'm actually gonna push you under the bus, heads up, Joe. That maybe Dr. Luz could fill the REMAC in regards to the conversation with Ryan Greenberg when he came to visit the region. I know you spent a few hours with him, so.
Well, actually, I only spent about 40 minutes with him because I was working till 5:30 to get there for the end of his meeting. It was very informative, it was very helpful. I mean, sounds like he's going to be quite flexible in terms of, how regional areas handle their EMS services. And, he has an endpoint in mind. And if you get there by using volunteers together with paid staff or all paid, or he's really very open to multiple ways of getting to a set endpoint, which seems like a very good idea.
I get the same impression, this general impression from the conference calls we've been having. The first Wednesday of every month, we have a conference call, we being all the program agency directors, have a conference call with Dan Clayton and Ryan Greenberg at 10 a.m. And it was, they have been very helpful, very positive. They actually go down the list of the program agencies and ask what's on your mind, and does anybody else have any input on the same subject and so forth. And it's very helpful, very positive, very positive. It's interesting that, not to get too far off the topic, but it's interesting that the one big issue that all the program agencies are interested in is timely payment of the quarterly vouchers, which is, that's the underlayment for the whole program, of course, but they've assured us that that will be going forward. So more about that during the AAREMS portion. But everybody who's, I haven't met Ryan personally yet, but everybody who's met him said the same thing as you said, Doctor.
He seems like a very, very amenable, very easy to work with sort of individual.
Yeah, he comes across that way, certainly. Anything else for the REMAC? Dr. Markowitz, what's your pleasure?
Let's have some lunch.
Sorry.
Let's have some lunch.
Okay, 11:38, we're adjourning.